We're going to take a look at what the international press has been saying about Theresa May's defeat in Parliament yesterday. To do that, we're joined in the studio by political commentator Daisy McAndrew and by our very own Alistair Sanford. Good morning to you both.
Good morning, Belle.
Let's start with the British press and this idea of where Theresa May is at now, because it's quite unusual for her to still be in power after this sort of a defeat.
Well, exactly. I mean, no other Prime Minister would still be clinging on, but she is clinging on. And Peter Lilly, a former Conservative Cabinet Minister, said yesterday she's like a limpet, and she certainly has been. This is her 28th parliamentary defeat, I think, but clearly by far the most significant and the biggest. And you can see, you know, the Sun, Brexit, you know, May's deal, dead as a dodo, Daily Mail fighting for her life, and so on they go. I think it's not just the deal that's dead. I think her political career is certainly as a Prime Minister is dead. It's just how long. It's not now, you know, if she goes, it's when she goes. And we know that the others are circling around her. Boris Johnson is, you know, he's on manoeuvres. He's just got £20,000 loan from Linton Crosby. He's set up an office with staff. He's lost lots of weight. You know, he is clearly waiting for his moment now. We've been there before. He's bottled it before. But I think now she is going to be gone quite soon, I think.
The Sun's on fine form with that photo. I mean, I think when it really wants to put the boot in, it does start dressing up its victims in terms of ridicule. So Theresa May as a dodo, I think, you know, is quite striking. But the Daily Mail also, who's been quite supportive of Theresa May recently, says she's fighting for her life. But the list just under that main headline of all the things that are combining now against her, biggest ever defeat in the Commons, now a no confidence vote, regardless of whether she wins that or not. It's not exactly helping her. The cabinet split over her plan to work with Labour. And then finally a comment about the EU, and I think they're referring to Donald Tusk's tweet suggesting, well, there's one option now for Britain: stay in the EU.
Absolutely, which is definitely not a done deal. But Daisy, it's interesting you mentioned there the idea that this would be a Tory, a Conservative Party leadership campaign, rather than Jeremy Corbyn and the opposition coming in and swooping in.
Well, of course, he's not, you know, he's in a very difficult position himself. We've already had John McDonnell, his number 2, Shadow Chancellor today, raising the prospect of agreeing to what is basically their commitment. If they can't get a general election, they're supposed to support a second referendum. John McDonnell wants to, Jeremy Corbyn doesn't want to, because he's instinctively more Eurosceptic, and also he's worried about those Labour voters who are also Leave voters. And it is interesting, you have this very strange political situation now where you cannot, you know, voters are promiscuous. They're not necessarily a die-hard Labour voter or a die-hard Tory voter. They can be a Leave, you know, and a Labour voter and so on. So it is much more complicated for the leaders to understand where their hinterland is. I think that's what we're seeing now with Jeremy Corbyn trying to be everybody's best friend and failing.
And of course, all of this chaos yesterday has created more turmoil. Business famously does not like uncertainty. How has the financial press been reacting?
The FT has an interesting article saying that the Chancellor, Philip Hammond, had a conference call with business leaders last night, and he's suggesting that a no-deal Brexit can be blocked, raising the possibility for the first time of a delay to Article 50. Now, that would, it seems, put him at odds with the Prime Minister's official line, who wants to keep no deal on the table as a backup to incite people to vote for her deal still. But it does also quote the anger amongst certain business leaders who are exasperated after yesterday's vote. One comment saying that it was describing it as Parliament's pantomime.
And the markets, when they opened this morning, the FTSE and sterling, you know, neither of which were down as much as some doomsdayers yesterday were predicting. But I think that's because the markets and the city view this as a potential extension of Article 50, or at least that we are now less likely to crash out than more likely to crash out, interestingly. And that's certainly, people like Peter Mandelson yesterday were predicting exactly the opposite. So, you know, what do politicians know?
Absolutely. Of course, most of the sticking point here comes from the Irish border, that border between the Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland. Let's go to Ireland and have a look at what the press there is saying.
Well, just on that question of where does this leave the whole thing now, is a no deal more likely or less likely? The Irish Times would beg to differ, because their front page this morning, the main headline, May faces no confidence vote after historic Commons defeat. But the article below that says that Dublin now fears that the chance of a disorderly Brexit has increased, and it's to step up its preparations for no deal. It reminds me, I think, there was a graphic, tweeted by the IMF last year about the impact of no deal on Ireland compared to other European countries. And whereas other European countries, the graphic kind of went like that, for Ireland, it's like this, and the impact would be huge.
Yeah. Now, in the last hour, we've had the German economy minister saying that he would like to see the EU, to see Brussels give the UK more time to try to find a way through this Brexit process. Is that echoed in some of the papers from Germany and from France?
I think the Tagesspiegel and the other German papers are definitely a bit less unkind, if I can put it that way, than other European papers. And I think you can clearly see that there is a tentative hand being held out from German politicians towards Westminster, trying to help. I mean, they were briefing before the vote. The German finance minister was briefing that perhaps Britain could be given more time. So I think Theresa May is finding, more help from German quarters than perhaps other quarters today.
I think this Tagesspiegel sort of echoes the FT as well, actually, in saying that this is a bit of a wake-up call for Europe, and it casts their own strategy over Brexit into doubt, because up to now they've held firm, thinking that in the end the UK will yield, and yet that just hasn't happened. But in terms of how the two big countries in Europe are treating this, well, of course, Emmanuel Macron's had comments as well about where this leaves things, and Le Figaro reports what he had to say yesterday, suggesting that, well, one or two things could be changed perhaps from the withdrawal agreement, but given where we are now, they already bent over backwards to get that accord through back in November. Where can they go now? And
are any of those European papers looking at what might happen if Theresa May is out and the opposition perhaps were to come in?
Interestingly, the Spanish paper certainly has had a proper look at Corbyn, which I think the others possibly haven't, and they haven't realised quite how serious his position is. As I was saying, this difficulty within the Labour Party, and that newspaper saying Corbyn is not in a strong position over no confidence. And again, I was told, I was being briefed last night, that the Labour strategy was just to hit the confidence votes again and again and again. Jeremy Corbyn saying actually or John McDonnell this morning saying that that's not the way he sees it. But again, this is because he wants to go for a second referendum, and he is trying to push Jeremy Corbyn to do that. And so it's not just the Tory party. I think this whole disaster could spell disaster for both the Labour Party and the Conservative Party. I think it could be the end for Corbyn and May.
All right, and meanwhile for Brussels, a complete confusion in terms of looking on from the sidelines, it feels like. Thank you very much, Daisy McAndrew, political commentator, and Alistair Sanford.